More troubling news for Facebook. What's being called the Facebook Papers were published just last week, revealing the social media site's inability to moderate content and users who exploit the platform to incite violence. New today, Facebook's own analysis showed that hate speech and violence reports skyrocketed on the site after then President Trump posted a threat against George Floyd protesters in Minneapolis, and Facebook did nothing about it. Joining us now to explain the latest on the fallout is Sherr with CNET. Ian, thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
It appears situations are only getting worse for Facebook. What are the Facebook Papers and how did they become public?
Yeah, so these are thousands of documents from inside Facebook that were leaked by a person who used to work at the company named Frances Haugen, who went to the Securities and Exchange Commission as well as to the Wall Street Journal to try and kind of raise alarm about what Facebook is aware of, the impacts it has on society. And oftentimes the data that she had, which came from a lot of internal research and debate that happened within the company, is that Facebook was actually very aware of the problems that it was causing, while outwardly acting as though it did not really fully understand what was going on. And so as a result, now a consortium of different publications, including the Associated Press, the New York Times, all over the place, have access to these documents and are starting to sift through them to learn other things about how the company worked.
Now, do you think these papers are enough to bring Facebook down? Could they be so damning that it could just impact the company so much?
On Capitol Hill, there's this feeling that this is a tobacco moment for Facebook, meaning, referring to what happened now 3 decades ago when the tobacco industry's internal research was exposed publicly that actually showed that the tobacco industry knew about the harms it was doing to people's health, when in public it was saying that it wasn't. And it sounds very similar to what's going on with Facebook. The difference here, though, is that Facebook broadly is not a product that is causing harm, right? We're not looking at something that, just undebatably it is hurting people. What we are dealing with is huge problems that exist within Facebook that Facebook is aware of, right? Its impact on mental health, exacerbation of hate speech, disinformation, all sorts of stuff like that, and struggling to come up with answers and not being public about it as they are.
How can Facebook respond? Their communications department must be scrambling right now. Mark Zuckerberg, I can imagine, is only stressed out. How do you think the company should respond? What's the right move?
Well, what they've done and what they should do are very different things, right? So I'm not a PR expert, but I have watched that industry for a long time. And there's a general sense among reporters who cover Facebook that right now they are bungling the way that they're talking about this, that Facebook has broadly gone on the offensive. They have said that this is mischaracterization and that the research is meant to help Facebook understand itself, and that it's being twisted to be negative toward the company. And a lot of the reporters, including myself, would say, no, what this is showing that a lot of the concerns a lot of people have had for years are real, and that we need to take this stuff very seriously, and that the company needs to be more transparent with what it is finding out about itself. Because it would help all of us, I think, move forward in understanding how to interact with Facebook, how to have social media a part of our lives, in that we could actually understand the problems. Because most of us don't even have real data to fully understand what's going on.
Now, Facebook said that, the insightful speech, the hate speech, all of that skyrocketed on their website after President Trump made those threats against the protesters. Former President Trump is now looking to start his own social media website. We don't know if insightful speech would be found on that website, but just given the trend, it could be a platform where insightful speech could come up. Could what happens to Facebook have an impact on his ability to have a social media site like that, or to have, or the existence of any platform or online venue to kind of foster that kind of communication?
one of the things that I found very interesting about Truth Social, which is the name of Trump's social network that he's trying to get started, is that it's going to rely pretty heavily on this thing called Section 230, which is a part of a law that was passed a while ago that essentially protects online services from being held responsible for what's posted on their sites. So when something that's insightful gets posted on Facebook, you don't sue Facebook, you sue the person who incited the violence. The problem here is that there's a lot of debate now on Capitol Hill about how to change Section 230, how to change these laws to hold these companies more responsible. And in fact, President Trump, even though he is going to rely on that law to protect his social network from legal responsibilities, he himself has advocated for stripping the law down and making companies more responsible for what's posted on their sites. So I'm really curious to see what ends up happening. But regardless, whatever happens to Facebook will impact the rest of the tech industry, because Facebook is the largest out there, but is by no means alone in having these problems.
Absolutely not. Now, Mark Zuckerberg has been hinting to major renovation for Facebook, planning to change the company's name to focus on what he's calling a metaverse. What exactly is a metaverse?
Yeah, so the metaverse is a very weird, nerdy sounding thing that is essentially, if you think of the world of Ready Player One, if you saw that movie that came out a couple of years ago, or the book that preceded it, which is very popular here in Silicon Valley, it's the idea of having kind of a digital world where people can interact. This is something that sci-fi has talked about for a very long time. There's books like Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash and all sorts of other stuff. And the idea behind it is really to take a lot of what social media is today and make it something that we can interact with in a digital world. And it might sound kind of fantastical, but Facebook really thinks that this is the future, and it thinks that it's the next way we're going to interact with computers beyond having our phones, is that we might either go to a website or a video game like Fortnite, interact with people there, maybe watch a music production, or watching a movie in there even. Or we might slap on a pair of virtual reality goggles, right, that put a screen so close to our face that we think we're in the virtual world. And in either case, Facebook wants to be a part of that.
Do you think that it's going to help? I mean, I know sometimes companies try to rebrand themselves and it doesn't always end well for them. Do you think a name change or even a complete overhaul like they're trying to go for is going to achieve what Facebook is actually trying to go for?
There's no way that changing its name is going to change what's going on with Facebook. I think more than anything, if they go through with it, and the reports were that it might happen, it might not, is that it might help to at least get the company kind of positioned in a way that it's talking about the future rather than all of the trouble it's caused in the past. But make no mistake, there's a lot that needs to get fixed at Facebook, and no change of colors or icons or designs or names is going to paper over any of that.
Now, as the general public, Facebook has, I don't know how many users. Can we trust Facebook to control our world with this, so-called metaverse when it's already having so much trouble controlling social media posts?
I think that's one of the key questions that a lot of us in the tech world are asking. Facebook has more than 2.5 billion people using it every month. It's even larger when you start including Instagram, which it also owns, and WhatsApp, the messaging app that's very popular outside the United States. And so when you add all of this stuff together, this is the world's largest online population. It's actually larger than the population of any country on Earth. So the idea that Facebook is having all these troubles and now it wants to jump into a new form of technology, it is a little worrying, right? It definitely raises questions. But this is part of why I'm very glad and appreciative that these documents have been made public, is that a lot of the debate that existed around Facebook was really hard to kind of nail down, right? What are the harms it's causing? Well, here's a lot of examples, but we don't have any larger trend data because it's really hard to know what's going on across 2.5 billion people. But now that we actually have this data, we can start to actually talk about the problems that exist and tackle them. And whether or not Facebook fixes these problems, we as a society can start to deal with them. And I think that's a positive thing.
All right, well, the Facebook saga continues. Ian, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.